Hey friendlies, it's Carolyn and welcome back to my RV life. This is a real-time video. It's Tuesday, October 30th, the day before Halloween. Happy Halloween. This is a video I've been wanting to make for several weeks, ever since I sent in my absentee ballot. But as many of you know, I've been kind of going through a hard time, and we're getting down to the wire, and I really want to make this video because I think it'll really help a lot of people, and I'm hoping to be able to hold it together. I'm going to give you a quick update about where I am in my grieving. I'm still grieving. I'm still sad, and it doesn't seem to be quite as, it's hard to explain. I'm still sad. I'm going to be sad for a long time. I lost Capone, my dog, for those of you who may not know, a month ago today. And I'm just getting by, doing the best I can. So, trying to get back to my new normal and trying to get back to work. And so I want to talk to you today about voting. Voting is something very important to me, something many of you know I tend to be a little political, so voting is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I know one of the questions I get asked a lot, this is also an FAQ Tuesday video, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you vote as a nomad? And so I'm going to be covering today voting as a full-time RVer, van dweller, nomad, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to be covering things like residency, like if you are traveling full-time, you know, where does residency fit into being eligible to vote? So I'm going to talk about that. I'm just going to kind of brush on it because I've already done a video about that, and I'll supply links. So I'm going to touch a little bit about residency. I'm going to talk a little bit about absentee ballots and voting in person. And there's really a lot of planning that goes into voting if you are going to be a full-time RV or van dweller. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about like some of the moral things, I guess, or maybe some of the more just thoughtful things about voting in a place that I don't necessarily live all the time. So I'm going to talk about those. Also, this is life in an RV. I'm in a major storm right now. It's very, very windy, so there might be some rocking. That was a huge gust, so you might see the camera sway a little bit. I'm doing the best I can. So first of all, let's talk about where are you going to vote? As a full-time RVer, where are you going to vote? So some people choose to keep their residency in the state that they were from. You know, for example, I was from California, and so for a long time I kept my California residency, and so I continued to vote in California. Last year, though, after 2 years on the road, I realized I spent, like, out of the whole year, a couple of weeks, I think, in California, and I was spending most of my time in Arizona and Nevada, and so I decided to make my home state Nevada. And, you know, a few weeks ago when I got my absentee ballot, that's when I first started thinking, you know, this might be really useful information for somebody who is living on the road. So my state of residence is in Nevada, but I knew I wasn't going to be in Nevada in time to vote, which is a week from today. So I wanted to make sure that I had everything in place so that I could vote. So as far as residency, and again, I'm not going to get into the details of residency, but those of us who are full-time, we, you know, might want to start thinking about strategically about where we want to have our home state be. For me, I chose Nevada because, number one, there's no state income tax, you know, huge benefit. And number two, I spend most of my time in Nevada. And so I kind of felt that, you know, I could have gone to South Dakota. I think it's South Dakota. You can become a resident in a day. It's a lot cheaper, but I'm never in South Dakota. So I chose Nevada for its strategic location. You know, I'm kind of West Coast based, so I'll always be traveling through. And so the things that I need to take care of are going to be more convenient for me, including voting. You know, it's going to be up to you and what's important to you as far as choosing a state of residency, whether you want to continue to be a resident of the state that you're from or whether you want to choose a new state. But if voting is as important to you as it is to me, and I'm going to get into absentee ballots in a minute. You know, if you know that you can't always necessarily travel there to vote in person, it's just going to take a little more planning. If it's a state that you spend, you know, even if it isn't one of the states that most nomads choose because of, you know, things like tax breaks and things like that, if you spend 6 months a year in Tennessee, and you know you're going to be there every November, you might want to choose that state. So just know, you know, that if, again, voting is important to you, if being able to register your vehicle in person or visit DMV in person or any of those other things that just daily parts of, you know, living, if those things are important to you, then those are some things you're going to think about when you want to choose a state of residence. I chose Nevada. I knew I wasn't going to be back in Nevada in time to vote, and so that brings up absentee ballots. So being a full-time RVer, my state of residence is in Nevada because I do spend most of my time there, and my mailbox is there, and I have a street address there. So that all makes me eligible to vote. So when I set up my residency and got my driver's license in Nevada, I automatically registered to vote. One thing that I would encourage everybody to do who votes, if you go online, so you go to your county, whatever that county is, let's say you're San Francisco resident, go to San Francisco County government website, whatever that is, and double check that you are registered to vote before all of the deadlines to vote. So I did that several times this year, especially because I had just changed my residency last year. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be eligible to vote. So I urge everybody, whether you're a full-time nomad or not, to periodically go to your county or your state government website and confirm that you are eligible and that you are registered to vote, just in case there's any glitches, in case it's just the crazy stuff going on right now with a lot of voting things in different states. And I wanted to make sure that nothing weird happened, and that when I show up or send in my absentee ballot, that I would be able to, that my vote would count. I wanted to make sure my vote would count. So when you do choose a state of residency, you can often register to vote right there at DMV. Make sure you do that so that you're registered to vote. Go online to your county or your state government website, and you can just Google voter registration in my state, you know, whatever your state is. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you know your deadlines. If you do want to vote by mail, this was hard for me because at first I didn't know, am I going to be there? Am I not going to be there? Should I go? So that's another thing. If you request an absentee ballot, you have to then vote by mail. You can't request an absentee ballot, at least in my state, Nevada, and then, and I'm pretty sure most states, you can't even request an absentee ballot and then show up at the polls. No big deal, right? You show up at the polls and they say, you know, no, you can't vote because you got an absentee ballot. That means you just need to get your absentee ballot in, but you also need to make sure there's a lot that goes on, because maybe the absentee ballot had to be mailed in 3 days prior, and then you can't vote. So if you request an absentee ballot, just be prepared that you can't vote in person. So you need to know ahead of time, are you going to be there to vote in person or not? And if not, then you need to get your absentee. You need to, for my state, I actually had to fill out a form, print out a form, send it in by mail. I couldn't do it online. I actually had to send a form in by mail to request absentee ballot to vote by mail. And so if you're going to do that, just know that you can't then later change your mind and show up in person to vote. So you're going to need to plan that. For those of us who have our mail forwarded to us, you know, that means some planning, and you might have some tight windows there to request your absentee ballot. Go to your mailbox, wherever that mailbox is, probably in the state that you are a resident of, and then that needs to get forwarded to wherever you are. And for me, that was several states away, right? And so that took some planning. And then once I got it, I was able to mail it in, and that was pretty easy. Does that make sense? So most of the time, I think most full-timers are going to be voting by mail via absentee ballot. That just means know your deadlines. Number one, know your deadlines. When do I need to get my request for an absentee ballot in? What's the deadline for that? And what is the deadline for mailing in my absentee ballot? And make sure, does it have to be postmarked by that date, or does it need to be received by that date? So again, I think it's really important, especially now. We are coming up on one of what I think is the most important midterm elections probably in the history of the United States, past and probably for decades or centuries to come. So, you know, a lot of people aren't messing around with their vote this year, which is really good to see. So just be really, really careful. And I hope this what's been going on lately helps us all to, I know it's helped me, to be more active and to be more passionate and more making sure my vote counts. I think it's like 6 million people last election, the last presidential elections, who thought their vote didn't matter and could have swung the election a different way. So 6 million people, did I say 6 million? 6 million people who said, my vote doesn't matter. 6 million people thought that and didn't go to the polls. So, okay, so that's an absentee ballot. I think I covered that. You just need to plan and that's the thing with being a full-time RVer. A lot of things just take a little bit more planning, and as you know, planning's not my forte, but if it's important, I get it done. And the other thing is, if you are going to vote in person, again, just make sure, if you have to have a voter registration card for your state, make sure you have it. Just know what is going to be required of you to vote in that state, okay? Make sure your driver's license has the same address that your voter ID registration card has on it, that make sure you know where your polling place is. A lot of states are now offering early voting, which is extremely convenient, especially for people like us who, kind of our lives are fluid. It gives you the opportunity to say, okay, well, I don't have to be there on November 6th or whatever the polling date is. I've got a 2-week window now in which I can go there to vote. But again, I just can't stress enough, you cannot vote in person if you have requested an absentee ballot. So just want to be very clear about that. But the early voting is awesome. That gives you a bigger window. You don't have to be there just on one day. And if you're worried about crowds or whatever, the early voting will help you get out and get your vote in earlier, and then, be on your merry way and go on with your nomadic life. So voting in person, just make sure you have everything you need. Make sure your driver's license has a street address. In most states, I think you need to have a street address. I know in Nevada, I need a street address. And I'll talk about that really quickly, even though I covered it in my video about becoming a Nevada resident. I live in Nevada at least 3 months a year. They require a month. What they required from me was a rental agreement for 30 days in order to get Nevada residency. And because I live in Nevada for at least 3 months a year, but I don't live someplace that has a street address. I live on public lands. I live in national forests. I live in BLM lands. I can't give that as an address to get a driver's license. And so I had to rent a space at an RV park for 30 days and get a rental agreement in order to get a street address. So that is now my street address. And if I need to renew my license and I need to show proof of residence again, then I'll go and I'll get another 30 days. They don't give me an address for living on BLM land. So what am I going to do? I am living in Nevada, and I'm just living someplace that doesn't have an address. And if you are going to be a resident of a state, just know for elections, in many states, there was just a big story about, where was that? North Dakota, I think, or South Dakota, where they decided they weren't going to let people vote unless they had a street address. So again, just be aware. Go to your website about voting, what is going to be required when you get there. Make sure you have everything in place so that when you show up, you can vote and your vote will be counted. And that brings me to my last point, and that is my second to the last point. If you do get to your polling place and for whatever reason you are not allowed to vote, you are entitled by law to request a provisional ballot. So if you are ever denied, I don't care where you are, what the circumstances is if you are denied the right to vote at your voting place, absolutely demand, if necessary, a provisional ballot and follow the instructions on that provisional ballot so that you can do whatever steps need to be taken so that you can cast your vote. Okay, so a provisional ballot if you are turned away from the polls for whatever reason. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the basics of voting as a nomad. And the last point I want to bring up is, I was just thinking about this, you know, as I was filling out my absentee ballot and thinking and reading all of the different propositions and things like that. I'm gonna refrain from voting for things that don't affect me. But I live in public lands. There are things on the ballot that don't affect me at all. And so therefore I kind of feel like I don't really have the right to weigh in. You know, some people might argue that, you know, maybe I don't even have a right to vote for a congressman or a senator because, you know, I'm not a permanent resident. Under Nevada standards, I do have a right. But as far as like some of the local initiatives and things like that, you know, I don't know that I necessarily spend 3 months in the same neighborhood or even in the same county. I am in Nevada. So I don't know, that just might be, that's just something that I thought about, you know, school bonds and school boards and justice of the peace. Although, I don't know, I guess the justice of the peace might affect me. It could someday, right? And police. Okay, I might have to rethink that. You know, I don't know. That's just something I thought about, and it's something that might come up in the comments, and it's something that you might be thinking about or considering as well. That, you know, if you're truly a nomad and you are truly, you know, just kind of passing through, and maybe in some cases like South Dakota, maybe just being a resident of that state or that county on paper only, but you still want to vote for important elections like midterms and for president and things like that, which we have every right to vote for, you know, as a transient. That's the word I was looking for. As a transient, you really want to weigh in on things that aren't going to affect you and your life. I don't know. That's just my take on it. You might have a different take on it, but that's what I'm thinking. That, you know, when I was going through my ballot, there were things, and I weighed each and every one. I'm like, you know, is this really affecting me as a transient member of this community? And if not, then I just passed on it. Oh, the last thing, one more thing, is I don't know in every state if it's possible to do this, but I'm also seeing a lot of stories about people's votes getting changed. So if you can, once you cast your vote, and once you know, turn in your ballot, if you can verify that everything you chose is in fact what's getting recorded, you might want to do that as well. I know that some of the electronic polling places are having issues where their votes are actually getting changed. They vote for one candidate, they go and, you know, when it comes up, their vote is for the other. Some of it's been user error, some of it they're saying is buggy old systems. You know, I don't want to get into the politics of that because I know that, you know, this video is already going to probably cause a bunch of controversy, because it always does. I'm laughing. Hey. Okay. So I think that covered everything. Voting as a nomad. How to vote as a nomad, as a full-time RVer or van dweller. Number one, make sure you're registered. Whatever your state is, make sure you're registered. Register when you become a resident of that state, or if you've been a resident of that state forever, still go online periodically, especially I'd say like 90 days before an election. Go to the website of the county and make sure you are registered. Make sure all the information is correct and make sure you're registered. Number two, if you are going to request an absentee ballot to vote by mail, make sure you have plenty of time to get that in by the deadline, and keeping in mind that it's going to have to be sent to your mailbox, and then it's going to have to be forwarded to you wherever you are on the road. And for me, sometimes that can take a month. So just be prepared for that. The third thing is, if you do request an absentee ballot, whether you use it or not, just requesting an absentee ballot precludes you, prevents you, I don't know. I have no brain. My one brain cell is exhausted from all this grief. But anyway, precludes you, prevents you. You are not allowed, even requesting an absentee ballot, you are then not allowed to vote in person. So keep that in mind too. Once you request an absentee ballot, you are committed to voting by mail. So again, plan. Number four, if you are going to be in your state of residence, your county, your city of residence, for voting, you can do early voting. Just know what the dates are. For the county that I live in, the county that I live in, I just happened to notice that early voting ended I think like 4 days before the actual voting day. So common sense might tell you, oh, you can early vote all the way up to election day, which is the 6th. Nope, it ends like on the 2nd. So early voting ends like 4 days before the election. So make sure you know for your state. Don't take anything for granted if voting is important to you. And please vote, please vote, please vote. It is so important. It's so important. And if for whatever reason you get to the poll and you are denied the right to vote, demand a provisional ballot and follow the steps to do whatever you need to do to then cast your provisional ballot. Okay? Okay, I hope that's helpful to all of you. Happy voting day. Get out there and vote. Get out there and vote. I think that's all. Kind of a short and sweet video. I hope the wind and the rocking wasn't too much. And happy election day. And we'll see you all soon. In the meantime, be happy, be free, and be kind. Mwah. See you soon.